Welcome to the Authentic Change Podcast. I'm Mike Horn, your host, and this podcast is for leaders and coaches who need and want fresh perspectives on what it means to live and to lead authentically. You're a leader who wants to make a difference, but sometimes you feel stuck. You know there's more to life and to leadership than what you're currently experiencing. It can be tough to figure out how to grow as a leader. You might be reading all the blogs and books, but it still feels like you're not making progress. You might even be feeling like you're doing everything wrong. On Authentic Change with Mike Horn, we interview experts who share their insights on how to live and lead authentically. Our guests are trendsetters in building great leaders, teams, and organizations. We provide fresh perspectives on what it means to live with purpose and authenticity. Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change Podcast. I am delighted to have in our studio today Dr. Kevin Gazzara, and he is a founder and senior partner of Magna Leadership Solutions, which we'll talk about today. Kevin, before I begin to describe more, I'd like to say welcome, and maybe you could tell our audience about who you are and what you do and the value you're bringing in the world.
Well, Mike, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in the podcast and connect with your listeners. I listened to your podcast for a long time, and I think you and I had crossed paths many, many years ago through some of our work in the corporate world. And kind of what I'm doing today is, as you mentioned, I'm a senior partner at Magna Leadership Solutions. I left the corporate world. It was 15 years ago in June. I spent almost 30 years in the corporate world doing lots and lots of different things. My background is in, undergraduate degrees in engineering and business, and did my MBA, and then went off and did all of my doctoral work around organizational leadership and management. And that's really been my passion. And I've been incredibly fortunate and blessed in my life to be able to work with wonderful leaders. I spent the last 18 years of my corporate life at Intel. I was a project manager, a program manager. I was a GM for them for a while. But the last 10 years I spent kind of managing Intel University, as well as managing their corporate residential programs from first and midline programs for the world. And we used to do 2,500 managers and leaders in 10 different countries every year around the world. So I got to develop the programs, deliver the programs. Fortunately, I had a nice sized staff, so I didn't have to do all of them myself. And when I had left Intel in June of 2007, took my early retirement, and took my early retirement. One of the things that I had this personal goal to do was that when I turned 50, I wanted to have my next phase of life. And I was able to achieve that. I actually retired right around 51. And my goal was I wanted to, myself and my two colleagues that came along to start Magna Leadership, we wanted to deliver, world-class leadership management programs, coaching for organizations that didn't have, $10 or $20 million budgets. And that's what we've been doing. We've been working mostly with small to medium-sized organizations or small organizations within larger companies. We deliver something called our Leading Forward Academy. It's a 6-month program that we really get the cultural change and the mind shift, to kind of taking ownership and getting things done and really focusing on a servant leadership approach. And it's been incredibly rewarding. I wouldn't do anything differently. And to get there, and we can talk about that through the journey, the important thing for me I've had awesome mentors and coaches. And I think that was the thing that allowed me to kind of fulfill my dream of kind of retiring at 50 and doing the next phase of life.
So interesting, Kevin, and so fortunate to have this conversation with you.
Why would people, given you've got a background in big corporation in running these residential programs, all kinds of development programs, and today with a focus on helping smaller businesses with world-class leadership development, what prompts people to work with you and Magna? What are some of the prompts that happen there?
Well, I think the prompts have been pretty consistent over the 15 years. First of all, I actually have done a podcast on how do you break out of the corporate world and move into consulting and kind of the five elements that you have to take into account to do that. We could do that on a different podcast. That's not what you're focused on. I think that there is a consistency, Mike, that a majority of the time, most of our work comes through referrals rather than, we don't do cold calls or anything like that. It comes through referrals. And typically what we find is that we have one of two conditions that exist. And particularly today, the one condition seems to be a little bit more prevalent. And the first condition is organizations can't hire or retain their best people, right? That's the first thing, and with the current situation with low unemployment, that's become incredibly prevalent. So what they've recognized is kind of something that you've known, I'm sure, from all the experience as well as your academic work, that people, and leave because of the managers, right?
Right, so, right. Yeah, definitely.
So if you don't have really good managers and leaders, that's driving the people out of the organization. So typically we get a lot of the inquiries where people can't retain their best, people are leaving, they can't hire new people, can't attract them because of the culture with organizations don't have that great reputation that they want in the area. So that's the kind of the first scenario that we get, and we get, I'd say probably 70%, 60 to 70% are there. The other situation we get is organizations that really have a great culture. They have terrific leadership, very, very strong culture and leadership. They don't have the turnover problem. And what they've recognized is they want to continue to grow. Many of the organizations, the smaller to mid-size, have kind of hit that plateau, right? And what they've done is they've realized they just can't keep adding people or adding capacity. What they have to do is they have to develop the people so that they can kind of move from that plateau to the next expansion.
Yeah, I think it's the one leadership development hack that is well worth noting. And that's the practice of self-development. Many people leave organizations because they don't have a sense of development. They don't have I don't want to say a development plan, but they don't have a sense of progress. They don't have a sense of development. And the manager's key in that. And I think most effective managers practice self-development. But because we have a vast majority who don't, I mean, you end up with this, the quiet quit, the great resignation, whatever you want to call it. And I'm wondering, I mean, how do you sort of ignite that spark in the situations in which you find yourself, Kevin?
I would say, first of all, if you have a learning culture, right, it makes it very easy to ignite the spark. And actually, I'm working on an article now around what I call correlational and causational leadership, right? And a majority of the organizations that I've seen and that we worked with and helped transform are causational. And, humans, as want the cause and effect relationship. Like if I put 5 hours of this development, I get 5 hours of this productivity out, right? And it's kind of that Wall Street short-term mindset. And that's what I would call kind of a causational mindset. And the correlational mindset is if I do the development at the time where I need to be able to pull in the knowledge, it will be available. Sometimes it's very, very short term. Most of the time, because we're talking more strategy, it's long term. And the people that have kind of that belief, that growth mindset in place, are easy to convince. I would say that is not a majority of the managers and leaders. So to go back to your original question, so how do you get them to kind of give us the buy-in? Is I think the best buy-in is where they can see other people that have been transformed, where they've recognized the need to do this, they've shown the value, and because they're taking a longer term measurement system, right, where they've been doing this the self-development, personal development, focusing on the team's relationships and so forth, that over time that they've recognized results from it, right? And if you can get somebody, and most of the time what will happen is an organization will contact us and say, hey, we're interested in doing, first of all, they want to do leadership training. We don't do training. We provide facilitated opportunities to give people tools to learn and grow, with a focus on kind of a project management approach where they're bringing real problems in and solving them, so they can see that cause and effect relationship. What we want to do is we want to connect them with people that have made that transition and recognize, like, oh, I did this and I've been working on this for a year, and now when I need that knowledge or be able to pull from like kind of the sage powers that I have, it's available to me, and it's made it so much better. And by the way, the byproducts are as people seem to stay. I get less HR complaints. People aren't, fighting with each other. They're being more collaborative. So you have all of these little artifacts from doing this, and over time, there's enough of them that it kind of becomes prevalent to the individual. And they say, oh, well, that investment I made or I've been making over the past year or 9 months or a couple of years, whatever it is, now I can see the correlation.
And where does alignment happen? So you've got a lot of this great individual insight that might be going on in facilitated learning events. How does that blend in your experience into something that creates a bigger drive or some sort of maybe gestalt?
Well, I think the biggest thing that we've discovered, Mike, kind of moving much more to kind of a learning rather than a training environment, has been is that you need to put systems in place. And I've been a big systems thinker. I was very, very fortunate when I was at Intel. There were 4 of us that were chosen from the company to go get trained and certified by Peter Senge in the 5th discipline in systems thinking. And I started teaching systems thinking in 1996. And I've been doing it, for the past 20, 30 years. And it's just something that I just absolutely buy into. And the key is that you have to look at everything as a system. You have to have all the elements in place. You have to have the learning. You have to have the opportunity to apply it. You have to have a feedback mechanism. Quite often it's an electronic system. We have our own system that we make available if anybody wants to try it, called easy360feedback.com. So you can go there and try that and play with that. That's interesting to you. You need to get the feedback system from your mentor or your coach or your buddy as part of the elements of the system. You need to have that continuous learning. We use something called reinforcement messages that are constantly reminding you of the types of things. It's that continuous touch points. If there are any fans of Marshall Goldsmith, who I am a giant fan of his, Marshall did an amazing study many, many years ago, over 20 years ago. And what he found was it wasn't the intensity of the feedback or the touch points. It was the frequency, of the touch points that gets the real behavior change. And that's something we've adopted kind of in our approach. And we find that the best learning organizations have adopted that learning is not an event, it's a process. And the key is you have to put the elements in place so that it feels like a natural process, as opposed to, oh, I have to stop now and do work for my learning for an hour, and then I'm going to go back to my real work. That doesn't work, right? You have to say, on a regular basis, I'm going to start using all of the stuff that I've learned and I've practiced, I've taught, that my mentor is giving me additional tips to do. And if I can do that and it really becomes part of it, I think the best thing that we found is when we have all of our graduates finish, the one common theme has been is what I've recognized is I'm using all of the things that I know will help me get better and help the organization and deliver better business results. And I don't think about it anymore. It's just become part of my kind of DNA. And that's to me is what you want to do, as opposed to just doing training and get the check off.
Sure. And as you think about different leaders in organizations, how do you create this buy-in for development culture? I mean, what are some of the ways that you've experienced, or what are some of the things that you've observed, Kevin?
Well, I think the first thing is, and we've tried this both ways, Mike, is that that you have to get the buy-in at the highest level, that they have to lead by example. One of the things that we've done in our programs is that we put all of the different levels of leaders together simultaneously, and we designed all of the activities so that you can have someone that's on the shop floor and the CEO who could even be, we call them capability partners rather than accountability partners, could be a capability partner because both of them have opportunities to learn from each other. So that's, I think, is the first thing. It says you have to have that continuous connectivity, and you have to have the buy-in from the highest level. We have one client that we've been working with for many years, and we've desperately tried to get them to put for the CEO and the executive staff to kind of go through this. So they're using the language, they're using the tools, they're leading by example. And what we found is there's been a reluctance. So we've been able to shift the culture of the organization. But the difference has been is it's taken a good 5 years because now the lion's share of all the managers, one level below, have the tools, and they're actually acting in a training or development, and they're training up. What we found is the organizations that buy into it right away, where we get the CEO and their staff playing instantaneously so that other people can say, well, you're holding me accountable, and I notice that you're doing what you're supposed to do from a servant leadership type of model. Okay, I'm bought into this, and you can do it either way. The question is how quickly do you want it to kind of latch onto the organization? And the only way you can do that is you have to have the senior buy-in. They have to lead by example, and they have to really buy in and encourage the stuff that we're doing.
And Kevin, you mentioned easy360feedback.com as a place as an assessment site with additional information available there, I'm sure. What is the role of 360 in leadership development, and how have you seen it evolve over time?
Well, I think one of the things that when I was working at Intel, continuous feedback was kind of one of the foundational guidelines, or one of the foundational values, right? So I would say Intel truly was a learning organization, a wonderful place for me to develop. I want great managers, and I really learned so much from them. Having that continuous feedback, I think, is incredibly important. The one big difference that we find that where organizations really kind of screw up is that they see the feedback as a performance tool. And the minute that the feedback system becomes a performance tool, or HR kind of latches onto it, bad things happen. That right. People try to figure out ways to work the system and so forth. And we saw this at Intel as well. The concept of the Easy 360 feedback tool was one that I had. And the idea is that it's feedback that you get anonymously from your stakeholders. Could be your staff, your boss, customers, internal clients, matrix managers, whoever it is. It doesn't really matter. It all comes in anonymously. And really, the only people that should see that is the individual. So as a coach, the only I see it to help work through that feedback, and the individual sees that. No one else sees it. Their manager doesn't see it. Staff doesn't see it. HR doesn't see it. Now, do we encourage them to share that with the other people? Absolutely. The thing is the minute that it becomes a performance management tool, everything falls apart. And I think that's the biggest tip or piece of advice that I would give to any organization is you have a performance management system. You absolutely have to have that. You have to hold people accountable. For development, it should be their development, and they should monitor and manage it. And whether they have an internal coach or an external coach, it really doesn't matter. They should have someone as a guide. They're the ones that should be working on that. And if you can do that, generally you're going to get really nice advancements. And the minute that it becomes part of the review system, bad stuff happens.
What are some of the suggestions or ideas that you might offer around creating a continuous learning process to strengthening leadership?
Well, the first thing is if there is money available, right, where you can do investments, I think you're going to get a really great return on investment there, right? The key is you have to have a good measurement system. You can't invest the X thousands of dollars or tens of thousands, whatever it is, and look at it for 30 days or 60 days and say, what was my ROI? You have to be able to have this longer measurement systems. And one of the things that Senge taught me, particularly in systems thinking, is that if your measurement system isn't kind of attached to the time it takes to see the difference, then you're essentially going to be making bad decisions over and over and over again. So my first tip would be is if you're in an organization and you're not spending any money or resources or time or focus on developing your individuals, that's the very first thing you need to do. And then sometimes for small organizations, particularly, we've been working with a lot of manufacturing organizations with the pandemic that's happened and the supply chain in particular, and costs going up, inflation, all that the things are getting significantly more and more squeezed on the margins. So there's less money available. The best organizations recognize is we may need to do cutting things down. The short-term focused organizations just chop everything off. And then when the margins come back and the sales come back, then they try to restart it, and it's kind of the sine wave that's happening. So the best organizations make sure that the learning may not happen at the frequency or intensity that they've done in the past when times were really good and margins were high and sales were extraordinary. But you need to have that continuum so people recognize kind of the buy-in.
And Kevin, one of the things that you do at Magna Leadership Solutions is you have the Leading Forward Academy by Magna. What can a person expect from the Leading Forward Academy when they participate?
Well, I think the big thing that we've seen, and if you go to our website, you can see some testimonials and kind of outline. I did a very short video of kind of all the details. I'm not going to jump in there at magnaleadership.com, so you can see all that. I think when we've done that, we've been doing the academy for about 5 or 6 years now for many different organizations. The nice thing is as we put the managers through the different organizations, as the organizations grow and as new managers come in, we're just continually doing the next round of managers, and we usually do it in and classes run anywhere between 6 is our smallest for the small organizations. Most of the classes are 12 to 18 at a time. We do them virtually or in person. And I think the thing that we do at the end of all the academies is we do a final session to find out how it's affected individuals. And I think, and what we've seen over and over and over again, is that people have said one thing consistently is that what I've gained is I've gained a different perspective, which has really helped me at work. But more importantly, it's really changed my personal life and how I communicate with my kids, with my significant other. It's really made me think differently in a way that feels more natural. And now I spend a lot of my time much more kind of in the analytic and design phase rather than the act phase, right? Because that's where we love to live. We love to just kind of get in there and do it. And humans are just problem solvers. And the tendency is for us to just kind of do kind of a hit and run on the symptom and never really think deeper to what the true problem is. And the biggest difference is people really think differently. They think deeper, and they feel comfortable with it. And the types of designs or actions that they implement have a longer term effect. So you don't get that same troubleshooting or problem solving type of stuff happening over and over and over again. It's kind of like what I would call the whack-a-mole scenario, right? That most people, if you're playing whack-a-mole, want to figure out how do I get the bigger hammer, and also how do I get better at whacking the moles. And if you can really take a step back and think more from a system perspective, it might be better to figure out how do you move that whack-a-mole machine just a little bit away from the wall so you can unplug it and you can get the moles to stop popping up, right? And that's a much better use of time. It does take a little bit more reflective things rather than kind of the short term, as I talked about originally, is the kind of the causal mindset rather than the correlational.
Kevin, who or what makes someone ready for leadership development? Is there a particular type of individual who seems ready for leadership development? Or are there particular events, causations, maybe as you described earlier, that make leadership development just the right time? I know we balance that with this continuous journey and lifelong journey, but particular events or particular characteristics?
Yeah. So, one of the things that Intel had, which I thought was, and I think many organizations or several organizations that we work with is, I come kind of out of the world of engineering, right, out of the technical side. And there's lots and lots of organizations, whether it's manufacturing or design or semiconductors or biomedical or whatever, there's lots of people that have come from a more scientific background. And I think in schools and in universities, and I've been teaching at 6 different universities, teaching management leadership around the world, which is a whole nother portion of my life, very, very enjoyable. But I think the big difference is that the managers and leaders usually get to a fork in the road, very much kind of like the Wizard of Oz. And some people go to the right, some people go to the left, some people go both ways. There's a great statement that says, if you chase 2 rabbits, both will escape. And I think many of the people get to this fork in the road, particularly technical people. We, from a coaching perspective, my specialty is in coaching technical experts who happen to be managers and leaders and really need to make a change or develop some good methodology for dealing with the hard questions. So when you get to that fork in the road, you have to make the decision. Do I go to the management track, which is the human portion, relationships, so forth, or do I stay on the technical track? And Intel had both tracks available. One of the challenges is that people that have this need for power, title, and are really finance driven have a tendency to make bad decisions, that they recognize, hey, I am a technical expert in this area. I've developed amazing stuff. I've been a great performer. And now all of a sudden, you're rewarded and now you have a dozen people that report to you. And nobody's been given any of the training or development. And many of the companies, particularly some of the less innovative or less learning organizationally focused companies, just believe that if you're good doing technology, how hard can it be to manage people? And they get the title, they get the bonuses, They get the different staffs, they get the power, and that just feels great. And then when they have to do the management or the leadership stuff, they recognize that it's hard and they don't have the tools to do that. So that's a trigger of like, oh, maybe I need to do this. The other thing is I think as they're at the fork in the road, you want to have a good system in place with your organization that helps the people make the best decisions for them. Staying on the technical track for many of the people that are thinking about the other management leadership track is really the right choice for them. The difference is the escalation path to all of those elements and power and money and status and position and so forth generally takes a little bit longer on the technical track, and sometimes people just are not that patient. What we find is the people that make that decision for the wrong reason to move to the management or leadership track either fail or hopefully recognize early on that, hey, this was a mistake, and they have the ability to kind of backtrack on the road a little bit so they can get back in there. And fortunately, Intel, being the great company that it is, gave you that ability. Like if you failed or you were not really doing kind of great work as a manager, you had that ability because they didn't want to lose that intellectual property as well. Although that's a very, very painful time because you've been successful all the way up through the technical side, and now all of a sudden you've failed as a manager and leader.
And how do you see that in your client organizations today? Do you experience that? Do you see that? Do you see people who really just struggle with the whole concept of leading, despite their technical accomplishments or their expertise?
Yeah. I would say it's probably, fortunately for the organizations we work with, I would probably say it's about a 70-30 split, where 70% of the people that are in the management leadership positions have been the right choice. They just haven't been given the necessary tools to be successful. And those people are awesome. The other 30% or so that have made the decisions and are just struggling, and they're just continuing to just be a mediocre or poor performer, just outside of kind of getting fired. Going through the academy, particularly since a good portion of it is self-reflective, heavily based around kind of emotional intelligence and the servant leadership model, get very, very reflective. And I wouldn't say we have all 30% of them change. We usually have, I would say, probably 10% where they've kind of recognized, hey, this was a mistake. Although what I've learned is I'm particularly good at problem solving, or I'm good at playing a part as a team member and so forth. And then we give them tools to go have a constructive conversation with their boss to say, I think you're missing a big piece of my talent. Here's how I can continue to contribute at a higher level without having to do all of the administrivia that you have to do with managing and writing reviews and hiring and firing and so forth. And we give them a method, a path to have that conversation where they feel like, hey, I've self-discovered this. This is what I've recognized through all the different tools and assessments that we run them through. And they have a very forward-thinking conversation, as opposed to them feeling like I have to go in with the tail between my legs and say, hey, I realize I'm kind of screwing up and you ought to demote me or fire me and so forth. We don't want that, because most organizations we found really do have the right people. My business partner and I many years ago wrote an article. You can just Google it, I'm sure. It's called "Throw the Seats Off the Bus" by myself and Dr. Ali Bakani. And we took the concept of good to great from Jim Collins about getting the right people on the right seats on the bus. And our philosophy is a little bit different. It's not so much that you need the right people on the right seats on the buses, is you need to kind of fill the bus with the beanbag chairs so that the people's talents and skills and passions the chairs conform to that, rather than forcing that 200-pound person into the 100-pound chair.
And Kevin, I'm sure that many of our listeners might be interested in what's evolved in terms of facilitation in a world where more things happen through electronic mediation, Zoom meetings, Google Meets.
When the pandemic hit, we were delivering all of our programs, both I would say 100% of the programs, the Leading Forward Academy, as well as a good portion of a lot of the executive coaching that we had done. We were doing face to face. I'm based here in the Phoenix area, and then we also have an office in Southern California. And we were doing a lot of car trips and flying back and forth and between the different clients. And we try to do everything as face to face as possible. The pandemic forced us to change that. And what we recognized is that you can get very, very close to what you get face to face, but you have to really pay attention to how you're delivering it and how you're doing the interaction so it feels more natural. One of the recommendations I'd make, Mike, for your listeners is many years ago, I had read a book called Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina. I don't know if you've read that book or not. It's spectacular. And it's a neuroscience perspective of how we learn. And at the time, it was way before the pandemic happened. At the time, it really talked about how we learned and the importance of having these what we call burst activities and mixing things up and using lots of different media and video and breakout rooms and one-on-ones and giving a tool and allowing people to try it in a safe environment and then immediately apply it. So what John talks about is he says you kind of need to mix this up about every 10 or 15 minutes. And if you can do that, you can maintain that not only the level of engagement, but the absorption of the concept. So we've done that. So the people that are doing a lot of electronic work is that you really need to understand that so that it's not just a normal face-to-face meeting or activity or training that you're doing just on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever tool that you're using. That you have to change it for the medium. And I don't think we spend enough time. I don't think we give the tools to the people that are managing or facilitating the tools to do that. And if you can structure it in a way, you can really have a very, very rewarding kind of event or activity that's happening. You do have to do it differently, though.
You do. And Dr. Kevin Gazzara, this has been wonderful to learn more about the work that you're doing and how you're developing leaders in the world and how your business, Magna Leadership Solutions, serves as a trusted advisor for executives of small to mid-sized organizations who want to realize an investment in emerging leaders to solve their growth and engagement challenges. It's great work that you're up to. If you wanted to shape some words on authenticity and leadership, Kevin, is a way of beginning to wrap up. I mean, how would you put those together? How do you put those concepts together?
Mike, well, there was a great Harvard Business edition that was done over 20 years ago just on leadership. If you can still get a copy of that, I would give the advice to anyone listening to go and do that. I mean, it was HBR on leadership. I think it was right around 2000. And if you read the entire document, they essentially have what they call commandments that are kind of weaved through the document. And there's really 3 commandments of leadership. And the first commandment is know thyself, right? So to be authentic, you have to know who you are. There's lots of ways to do that. You can do that through a coach or a mentor. We use lots of assessments. We use the Target Training International assessments for DISC and values and emotional intelligence and leadership. So the task quotient for task preferences, we all use all those to kind of do that, create that self-awareness. And the second commandment is once you understand that of who you are and you're given the tools to be able to kind of act authentically, we want you to be who you are. The key is you need to deliver your messages in a way that can be heard. And quite often we find out that that's one of the big gaps in leadership is they want to be authentic. They know that they want to be hard driving. It's much more on how the message is delivered, not so much on the delivery. I would say there's two approaches. There's being you can either be aggressive or assertive. And we find that the best leaders are aggressive, that they go after the tasks, they hold people accountable, and they do it in a way that you get the buy-in. The leaders that are aggressive, or they're going after the individual rather than the task or the deliverable, are the ones that really fail or can attract the people. So you have know thyself is the first commandment. The second commandment is understanding others. So spending that time to make the connection, deliver the message in a way that works for them. And then the third commandment is that you need to initiate and sustain change. Because if you do the first two, that's interesting. Leaders are expected to deal with change, right? So if you can initiate it and sustain it, it's not just a hit and run kind of environment, then you'll be recognized as a leader.
Isn't that great? I mean, so really these three elements about knowing yourself, understanding others, initiating, sustaining change. And Kevin, if people wanted, if our folks in the audience or others wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that? What's the best way to find a way into Magna Leadership Solutions and Kevin Gazzara?
I think there's two entry points, Mike. You can go to our main site, which is magnaleadership.com. If you're interested from a executive coaching perspective, I have a separate site that's co-linked called PQ Training and Coaching.com, which stands for Positive Intelligence. I did my ICF certification as well as my Positive Intelligence certification over the last couple of years, and I've been using that. So if you're interested from a coaching perspective, you can reach me there, or just send me an email.
And what is that again, Kevin? It's PQ Training
and Coaching.com.
And Coaching.com. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a bunch of great free assessments there and so forth. So if you want to do the first step in leadership and being authentic, Mike, your readers can just go and go there, and they can get the pointers to the assessments, or just contact me. Kevin at magnaleadership.com. I'm always delighted to hear from the different people that have heard me on a podcast. And if I can help you, the number one promise I have is I will be here to help you, and you will get zero selling from me. We stay incredibly busy, and so I am not going to sell you on anything. My goal in life is really to help others. I am in the last phase of my career. I turned 67 tomorrow.
Oh, so, happy birthday!
Thank you. So if I can be of assistance to people and help them, great. If there's financial compensation down the road, fine. And if there isn't, that's equally as good. My real delight comes from seeing people change and be able to kind of shift their life to where they can be authentic and they can have purpose. And my strong belief is that every day that you work should be a day that you look forward to doing another one of those every single day of your life.
Thanks for all this wisdom, encouragement, inspiration, and value and contribution you bring, Kevin. And everyone, it's easy to get in touch with Kevin at magnaleadership.com. Send him an email there, or at magnaleadership.com as a website, pqtrainingandcoaching.com. But easy way to get in touch with Dr. Kevin Gazzara is via email, Kevin at magnaleadership.com. Kevin, once again, thank you so much for being a guest on the Authentic Change podcast. And to all of our listeners, until the next time, stay well.
Thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast. I'm delighted that you've tuned in to listen. Please visit the show notes for links to topics discussed in today's podcast. To download a free ebook on authentic change and leadership, and to subscribe to my newsletter, please visit mike-horn.com. Once again, mike-horne.com, mike-horn.com. Once again, Thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast.